While we all wanted to talk about Paolo Banchero after Monday's game, the Orlando Magic wanted to talk about one player only. Anthony Black has grown up today on Locked On Magic.
You are Locked On Magic, your daily Orlando Magic podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And you are indeed Locked On Magic. Today is October 29th. It will be October 30th, 2024. My name is Philip Rossman-Reich. I'm the senior writer over at OrlandoMagicDaily.com. You can, of course, follow me on Twitter at PhilipRR_OMD. On today's episode of Locked On Magic, the big moment that Anthony Black stepped into and why everything has been building to this, how Black has matured and grown into a really strong player. We'll talk about his big moment coming up today on Locked On Magic. But before we do any of that, we want to thank you again for making Locked On Magic part of your day every day. No matter when you listen to us, whether it's first thing in the morning, whether it's right when we upload, we truly appreciate you making Locked On Magic part of your day every day. And you can make Locked On Magic an even bigger part of your day with the new Locked On Magic daily newsletter. It's the one stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free now at LockedOnDaily.com. That's LockedOnDaily.com, and start your day with the all-new free Locked On Magic newsletter. Today's episode of Locked On Magic is also sponsored by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. We all obviously want to talk about Paolo Banchero last night, and for good reason. 50 points, just an incredible game, historic game. We obviously, I don't think we've seen a 50-point game for an Orlando Magic player in 20 years. It was a big deal. And I don't, even though Paolo said he never scored 50 in a game before, I think we all believe that is not going to be the last time that Paolo hits a half century. But it was funny trying to put all the articles together and writing about Paolo's 50-point game because he made it clear, and the team kind of made it clear that that's not who they were excited about yesterday or Monday. That's not who the team felt like really jazzed about and really like into and really excited about after that game. Because Paolo did a lot of the work. Not going to deny that. Not going to sit here and pretend otherwise. He did a lot of work and was vital to the team's efforts in Monday's win over the Pacers. But everybody was buzzing about the player who hit the most consequential shot of the game. A shot that, frankly, Anthony Black was not taking or hitting last year. He wasn't even in the opportunity to take a game-winning shot. And it's important to sit back and reflect on how we got to this point. How we got from where Anthony Black was last year to where he is today. Because it is a testament to his work and the trust and belief that this team has built. If you missed yesterday's episode, go back and listen to it. It's a good one, I think, just talking about Paolo Banchero's 50-point game. And I talked a little bit about Anthony Black in that game too, but it's worth repeating. With the game tied in less than a minute to play, Paolo Banchero had the ball at the top of the key, drove into the lane, took two defenders with him, sent the ball to Jalen Suggs on a ghost screen to the wing. Suggs got the ball, had a wide open three on a night where he was making threes, saw the defense closing out, pump faked, sidestepped, saw the help defender coming from the corner, and passed it to the corner to Anthony Black to hit the go-ahead and, yes, game-winning three to make it 118-115 with 33 seconds left. It was such a huge moment for this young player. Just no other way to say it, no other way to describe it, no other way to characterize it. This was a big-time shot and a big-time moment for a young player who is still kind of earning his stripes in the league. Everybody on the team that we talked to was so happy for Anthony Black. Jalen Suggs was literally beaming on the podium after the game when someone asked about Jalen Suggs. Paolo Banchero on his night, that was his night, was absolutely beaming and singing Anthony Black's praises. And this is something that we felt building momentum and kind of building a groundswell. All anybody could do during training camp was tell us how good Anthony Black was. Tell us how much he had grown, how much better he had gotten. And yes, we saw it through the early games of the season. He'd scored 10 points in each of the first 3 games of the season. We saw that, yes, there was growth. But nothing tests a player more than being put under pressure. Nothing tests what a player is made of than having the game on the line and having to trust all that work. Remember, when the Magic drafted Anthony Black last year, everybody was concerned about his shot, his shooting. Everybody was like, yeah, you're taking another 6'7" ball handler, another big ball handler, an excellent defender, that the guy can't shoot. That was the rap on Anthony Black. And now we're sitting here talking a day later about a player who's shooting 51.4%, I think. I'll get his numbers here in a minute. A guy who's shooting 50% from 3 through the first 4 games of the season and just hit a ridiculously big shot to deliver 57.1%. I undersold it. Get a ridiculously big shot to win the Magic a critical game, a game that I think a lot of us recognize and understand. It's not just important for momentum and for the early season, a game that could have a lot of meaning when we get to April with the Magic and Pacers tied in the standings last year and potentially very close in the standings again this year. This was a huge shot and a huge moment. It's something that Anthony Black has worked for. I've talked a lot about Anthony Black on the show, and it is worth repeating. The Magic threw Anthony Black into the deep end last year. The injury to Markelle Fultz put Black into the starting lineup, and he held his own, but he was a rookie. The Magic very carefully manicured his role. He had a usage rate that was less than 13%. It was like 12.6%. They didn't run a lot of offense for him. He really wasn't even running point guard. And Black said in the offseason, playing off the ball, being a corner shooter, he was actually pretty successful last year. Being a corner shooter was valuable experience for him, but he was eager to get back on the ball. He was eager to be a point guard and to play the role that he's playing this year for this team. But it was a lot of ups and downs, as Jalen Suggs admitted. As Jalen Suggs said, he looked to the veterans on the team for guidance on how to go through the ups and downs of an NBA season. This was his first time experiencing it. This was his first time going through this. And yeah, understandably, there might be a little bit of a confidence hit. There might be a little bit of a shot to his confidence. And frankly, Black played his last meaningful minutes in March and looked out of his depth. Filling in for Jalen Suggs, the Magic lost to the New York Knicks on the road and then lost to the same Indiana Pacers at home in critical games that we hyped up as playoff practice. Black didn't look ready. And he didn't play 10 or more minutes in consecutive games for the rest of the season. He was out of the rotation, not someone the Magic could trust in the playoffs. And that's the important word here. It's trust. I talk about this a lot with coaching decisions. It's easy for us to sit here and say, oh, play Jet Howard more. Oh, why are they playing Gary Harris over Caleb Houston or whatever the case may be? It's about trust. And trust is earned on the practice court. It's earned in the opportunities you get. And, Anthony Black's a rookie. They know he's got a long career ahead of him. Anthony Black did not have trust to step up in bigger moments. That's why they stuck with Markelle Fultz. And if I have a criticism for Jamal Mosley, it's that he should sprinkle in and give these guys some opportunities so that they're ready for the playoffs, so that they're options for the playoffs. Anthony Black wasn't an option for the playoffs last year. He just simply hadn't played and didn't have that trust. So what did Anthony Black do about this? What did he do about it? We heard the stories over and over and over again. The dude did not leave the Advent Health Training Center. The dude put in tireless work, made an impression on teammates and on coaches, understood what he needed to do to take the next step, to be put in this position, playing against another playoff team, another playoff level team, in a close game, with the game on the line, to be trusted to take that last shot. That is incredible. That is incredible growth. That is an incredible step forward. And it's one thing for everybody to tell us this kid's been really good in camp. This kid's been really good in camp, and see hints of it through the preseason and through the early part of the season. It's another thing to see in a clutch moment, in a critical moment, with all the pressure. This kid looked like he had been there before. This kid looked like he was made for this moment. And look, we know this Magic team is incredibly close, that they are all in each other's corners. AB mentioned that Jalen Suggs literally picked him up from the airport and took him around town when he was drafted. These guys are tight like brothers. And you could tell how much everybody was beaming for AB to have this moment, for Anthony Black to have this moment. It was as big as Paolo scoring 50 points. And now, like everything else for this team, the standard is set. Paolo, I think, had the most insightful thing to say on Anthony Black. It was not a good game for Anthony Black. He scored only 8 points, first time under 10 points this season. And Paolo said, he missed some layups, missed some shots. He missed a three in the opposite corner a couple of minutes before. Last year as a rookie, he might have folded. He may not have been able to bounce back from that. But to be able to step in, game on the line, and hit that shot, despite all that, to make plays, some big plays, make some big free throws. Again, another weakness of his coming into the draft. Make big plays to help the Magic secure the win. That's the maturity that Anthony Black is showing, and that's the maturity that this entire team is trying to show. This is a big growth moment. And this is a moment where, yes, AB should have the complete trust of this coaching staff. The Magic bet big on Anthony Black being ready to step into this role. And I know we're only 4 games in, but he did. He stepped in and made a big, big play. And it just feels like there's only more to come from this kid. The big theme from the early part of the season is this team's maturity and how this team is approaching games. Why Jalen Suggs said grit is the G in Magic. I'm curious what the other letters stand for, but we'll talk about this team's grit early in the season coming up here in just a moment. But first, today's episode of Locked On Magic is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. The Magic are on the road this week, so don't get to go to the Kia Center until next Friday when the Magic take on the New Orleans Pelicans. But whether you're trying to see an event at Dr. Phillips Center, trying to get into the next Orlando City playoff game, get ready for the Orlando Pride's playoff game this week, coming up pretty soon. I believe it's this weekend. Or head to the Space game on Saturday to see UCF take on Arizona. Game Time has your ticket to the game. Game Time has great deals and offers on tickets for everything from football, basketball, sports, soccer, whatever, to theater, comedy, and shows as well. And it works wherever you are. You don't have to be in Orlando. I point out Orlando events because I live in Orlando, and those are the events that I'm looking at when I'm on the Game Time app. With Game Time, you can customize your spot. You can look at digital panoramic views of your seats so you know exactly what you're looking at. And with their Game Time Picks feature, they curate the best deals to help you save more on sports, concert, comedy, theater, and more. And with all-in pricing, you toggle that feature, it shows you the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. That's always the mystery of buying tickets, right? Game Time takes that away. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. It's still very early in the season. And I want to very much stress this. Like, to talk about some numbers here in a minute and give a kind of quick view of where this team is at 4 games into the season. Will be 5 games after Wednesday. I want to note all that. And I think it's really important to remember that we're still in the phase of the season where things are kind of weird. Matt Moore, the Action Network at HB Basketball, I really love this thing that he says, like the first 2 weeks and the last 2 weeks of the season are all kind of random. You got to get your work done in a little bit early. I don't know so much about the last 2 weeks of the season. There are some weird things that happen in the last 2 weeks of the season, but first 2 weeks of the season are absolutely random. Teams are in different places. They're kind of figuring themselves out. They're trying out some things before they settle into their routines and getting a sense of who they are. We'll talk about the road trip and how important that's going to be to what the Magic are trying to do here in a minute. But I would very much say, like, Monday night, it felt like the Magic were testing a switch 1 through 5 type scheme. In the first half, it looked like they were testing some doubling schemes and just trying to, like, get a feel for how different things might look. And that's completely natural at this stage of the season. It is not abnormal to be testing things right now. Just plain and simple. Everyone's trying to figure things out. I mentioned the 3-point shooting. Magic are taking a ton more threes than they did last year. We'll see where that number eventually settles. They ended up, I think, at like 41 on Monday. You know, they're probably going to end up in the high 30s, low 40s, which is a like significant increase. It's big. And, you know, again, everyone's still trying to figure out how everyone works, even with the continuity that the Magic have. But one thing the Magic are focused on, and one thing the Magic are trying to establish in this early season, regardless of what their stats say, is this idea of grit. Jalen Suggs mentioned it, you know, gave me the quote, gave me the inspiration for doing this post and doing this conversation, saying, you know, the G in Magic stands for grit. That's how embedded the Magic want this idea. They want it so embedded that it's literally in their name. It's on the crest that they wear, on the logo that they wear. They want grit to be that, like, important and that internalized. The G in Magic stands for grit. And that grit can be shown in a number of ways. Obviously, the most obvious way would be in the physical way that the Magic play defense. It was one of my big talking points coming out of Friday's game against the Brooklyn Nets, that the Magic were just this gritty defensive team. Their offense was kind of stuck in the mud, didn't really do very much. And the Magic were able to just kind of keep handle on the game because their defense was just so good. You know, Brooklyn never really found much traction against their defense, except when they turned the ball over. Even against Memphis, the Magic were not good defensively. But for that third quarter, the Magic found it. They found that grit. They found that toughness. And again, if not for a very sloppy second quarter and a very sloppy start to the game, Orlando very easily could have won that game. They found some grit. They found some toughness. You don't go on a 21-0 run without playing to your identity. Now, look, Monday's game was the worst defensive game the Magic had played all year. Some of it was just they were fouling a lot. They were just a step slow. They just were not in positions that they need to be in. And that is a major deal. That is a big, big deal. And so obviously the Magic had to find a way to win this game. And it's very much the same as what we talked about in the preseason. They gave up a 30-point quarter in the third quarter, gave up 39 points in the third quarter. Okay. Challenge is defend in the fourth. They give up 17 in the fourth. They finally found that defense to spark their offense and kind of get the wheel moving again. And that enabled them to win. That's what caused them to win. Very much so. Monday's game is not a game the Magic, you know, I think the Magic would have won a game like that last year, but it would have been 50-50. I don't think they would have had the same confidence to win that they had on Monday. But there was a determination and a steel to do so. And they all understood, as bad as they were in that third quarter against the Pacers, it had to start on the defensive end. They had to find themselves on the defensive end. That is the core of who they are. And if they have to get dirty and grimy to do it, they got to do it. They got to find a way to get out of the mud or drag Indiana into the mud and play their way. And that's frankly what they finally did in that fourth quarter. Look, they were cruising in that second quarter. They were playing their style. They weren't that great defensively, but Paolo was just carrying them, and Indiana was just kind of throwing their hands up. You could feel the frustration that they couldn't stop this guy. Then you had all the fouling in the third quarter that really took the Magic out of their rhythm. And the Magic were not going to win this game without a strong defensive effort. And so as this team continues to build its identity, and yes, even though it is a lot of the same players from last year, they've got to rebuild their identity. You do not just carry that over. You find it as the year goes on. And early in the season, there's going to be slip-ups. There's going to be some inconsistency, but you got to find your level. Water always finds its level, and that's the part of the season we're at, is we're trying to figure out where this team settles in. The Magic, though, I think understand very implicitly that their toughness, their mental resolve is what's going to separate them from a lot of teams. It's been a major talking point for this team. One of the lessons that this team believes they learn from their playoff experience is that mental toughness, is that knowledge, is that understanding of we are good enough to dictate the terms of the game. That when things go wrong, we just have to rely on each other to fix it, that we are capable of fixing it, that it's all on us to make that focus. And as Paolo mentioned after Monday's game, as Paolo Banchero mentioned after Monday's game, that's still a work in progress. This team is still really young. Paolo said he has to watch his intensity and that he is bringing the right level of intensity every moment because the team follows his lead. He understands that. And he understands, too, that at 21, he's still learning this stuff as well. But the Magic do have this very innately. They do have this level of grit that will enable them to compete in a very real way. But we got to get there. We got to get there. We got to build it. And this next week is going to be a big one. Let's talk about where the Magic stand entering this 5-game road trip and why this road trip is a big one to settling that identity. We'll get to that coming up here in just a moment. If you have listened to my show over the years, you've probably heard me say this usually before the first big Western Conference road trip. Like I usually say we really learned about the team during that first West Coast road trip, and that'll come up in December. But here we are. First big road trip of the season, 5-game road trip through the Midwest and Southwest, crisscrossing the country, having to deal with fatigue and travel, being away from the Kia Center, having to establish who you are. This is a big one. We are going to learn a lot about the Orlando Magic over the next few weeks. As we will, of course, throughout the course of the season, but especially here at the beginning of the season, we are going to learn what really sticks and what really travels. Because ultimately, that's your identity. Your identity is what travels, what you can count on when you don't have your best stuff. And look, that Memphis game was revealing. As much as we should and can, throw some of it and say, okay, back-to-back, first back-to-back, it's Memphis' home opener. They're a little ticked off. There are a lot of reasons why, Magic should have been more competitive. I'm not excusing that, but there's a lot of reasons to be like, okay, the Magic did happen, whatever. One game, not going to lose sleep. But Brooklyn, Miami, Memphis, and Indiana have all done the same thing to bother the Magic. And it's quite simple. The Orlando Magic have one of the best defenses in the league. In fact, in the early season, Orlando is still 8th in defensive rating at 108.7 points allowed per 100 possessions. They are 7th in offensive rating, top 10 in both offensive and defensive rating. You're going to be a very good team. So the Magic are doing really, really well early on in the season. But defensively, the Magic have to tighten some things up. And a big part of that is about pace. What Miami was really successful, one of the few things Miami was really successful at in their game was beating the Magic in transition. And the Magic know that this is going to be the strategy for a lot of teams. That the way you beat this Magic defense, you don't let them get set. In the half court, the Magic defense is going to eat you up. But what you can do is try and race down the court, try and get down the court, and get into your sets, create cross matches, create mismatches, create moments of indecision and miscommunication, and that's how you find holes. That's what Miami did really well. That's what Memphis did exceptionally well, and that's what Indiana did well. Indiana made it a point, because they've been playing very slow this year, to pick up their pace and try and push the tempo back at the Magic. And Orlando themselves are trying to play a little bit faster as well and pick up their tempo and get more possession there too, and get down the court before defenses are set too. So everybody's trying to do it. It can be a little bit breakneck, whereas I think the Magic, I think they should be trying to play a little bit faster, but they should always be under control, because they will benefit from a half-court game. And so the question's going to be, okay, now you're on the road. Now you have to be really in tune and really communicating well. How do you handle this challenge? And while I think the Chicago Bulls might be the weakest team the Magic are playing in this next stretch, Wednesday's game is an important test. We're 4 games into the season, so let's not read too much into anything. And the Bulls' offense has been bad. 106.4 points per 100 possessions, that's 27th in the league. But Chicago is first in the league in pace. 108.9 possessions per 48 minutes. They are going to try and run at the Orlando Magic. In fact, looking at fast break points, the Bulls are not that high on fast break points at 15.8 points per game, but they're going to try and run. Now, having said all this, Lonzo Ball is out. He has an elbow injury. He is not going to play. He's going to be reevaluated in a couple weeks. So that should slow their pace down. Lonzo Ball is someone who's very, very good at picking up the pace. But that's not going to be the only challenge on this road trip. This is a difficult road trip for the Orlando Magic, and that's why Monday's game felt like a must-win to stay above 500, to get to 3-1, and like make good on Saturday especially, but build some momentum heading into this road trip. Here's the road trip. Wednesday at Chicago. Friday, national TV game at Cleveland. Sunday at Dallas. Monday at Oklahoma City. Next Wednesday, 1 week from today, at Indiana. And then they play New Orleans, who's also playing very, very well at home next Friday. This is a very difficult road trip. Indiana's struggling, but we just saw them. We just saw how tough they can be. Chicago is struggling, but they play a style that could hurt the Magic. They're playing a style this year that is going to test the Magic. The Cavs have been not lights out to start the season. They really seem to be clicking under their new coach, Kenny Atkinson. The Oklahoma City Thunder have also been clicking. They're 3-0 as I record here today. And the Dallas Mavericks are the defending Western Conference champions. I turned to look over my shoulder to see that the Mavericks are up 5 on the Wolves with 2.5 minutes to play on the road, even with Luka dealing with that little injury that he had today. I want to make this part clear before we move any further. The Magic are and should be good enough to beat any team that they play. They may not be favored in every game they play, but the Boston Celtics might be the only team that Magic fans should say, okay, we got to do a lot of things really well to win this game. The Magic are good enough to beat every team in the league. That's where we're at. That's where this team is developed. So you look at this 5-game road trip, and yeah, it is tough, but the Magic could easily go 3-2 and be very happy. They could easily go 4-1 and be very, very happy. They are good enough to win all of these games. And I think that's important, and that's confidence that's important to remember too. But we are going to learn a lot regardless. We're going to learn how this team handles adversity on the road. We're going to learn what this team relies on. What do they bank on to help them win games? When they will have a 2-game losing streak at some point. May not be on this road trip, but when they lose a game, how do they respond? We saw what that looked like Monday. And, I don't think Paolo is going to need to drop 50 every time the Magic lose a game, but we saw them come out focused and fired up and ready to play. There's still a lot to tighten up, though. The Magic are not their final form yet. And that's the part that, there's some hand wringing about. Don't. It's still too early in the season. The things that they're making mistakes on are completely correctable. And they will get better with them over time. But this is a road trip to start seeing that improvement, to start seeing this team get better. We want to see the Magic be a top 2 seed and be a contender. Well, Friday night in Cleveland is that kind of a game. Is that kind of a game that's going to say, okay, who's the best challenger to Boston? With Philadelphia struggling, with Milwaukee struggling, with New York still kind of getting their pieces together. Who's the team that's going to challenge Boston? It's going to be us or Cleveland. Let's see how we look against them. Especially with all the emotion and coming back to Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse. Dallas and Oklahoma City, a back-to-back. How do the Magic handle a back-to-back against 2 title contending teams? Can they split those? Can they beat Indiana in their place after what just happened at the Kia Center? Can the Magic defend at the high level they defended at in Miami in another road game when you have to maybe manufacture a little bit of energy? It's not opening night anymore. It's not a clear rival. There is a lot that the Magic are going to tell us and teach us over the next week. And it's all going to come back to that G word, the grit. Is this team going to find the will to win games against teams that also have that will and have that grit? This is the fascinating stuff. This is the fun stuff. This is where we're going to see this team really grow. And it is a big, big week for the Orlando Magic this week. And I can't wait to experience it and go through it with you all together too. But that's going to do it for me today. I want to thank you all again for listening to today's episode of Locked On Magic. Of course, find me on Twitter at @PhilipRR_OMD. Subscribe to the podcast, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Himalaya, Google Play, Spotify, Odyssey, and all of the podcasts to your podcast-enabled listening device. For the latest on the Orlando Magic, be sure to check out OrlandoMagicDaily.com. You can, of course, find us there on Twitter at @OMagicDaily. And for even more Orlando Magic content, be sure to check out my Patreon page, the Orlando Magic Hub, at patreon.com/Orlando Magic Hub. As always, thank you for your support. As if that wasn't enough, your favorite podcast now has a newsletter. Introducing the Locked On Magic Daily Newsletter. It's the one stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free now at LockedOnDaily.com. That's LockedOnDaily.com, and start your day with the all-new free Locked On Magic newsletter. That's going to do it for me today, though. I want to thank you all again for listening to today's episode of Locked On Magic. We'll be back tomorrow to recap the Magic's game against the Chicago Bulls. Until then, for Orlando Magic Daily and Locked On Magic, this has been Philip Rossman-Reich. We'll see you all again next time for another episode of Locked On Magic.